Those of you who believe in free will, can God take an action that will result in you doing what you want to do, but it's also what he wants you to do? Seems like such a simple question. It's like a no-brainer for even the most basic free will Christian. Of course he can. I mean, this is how God gets stuff done. There we are, we're running around with free will. God does something, and it results in us doing something that he wants us to do so he can get his purposes accomplished, but it's still what we want to do, so we have free will. So if your answer to that question is yes, the reason you lose the debate is because all of the objections that come against Calvinism, against the idea that God is in control of all things, including what you'll do, all of them evaporate because all of the false assumptions that you make, all the false standards that you make, and all the arguments you bring against Calvinism is based upon the fact that God is determining what you do. The first one, if God determines what I do, he can't hold me responsible. If you admit that God can, in fact, take an action that will result in you doing what he wants you to do, but it's also what you want to do, you're admitting he's determining what you're doing. The next one is, if God determines what you'll do, that would make God evil. But if you're admitting, again, God can determine what you're going to do, but it doesn't make God evil because you're doing what you want, again, irrelevant grounds. How about if God determines what you do, you'd be a puppet or a robot? And if you say, well, he's determining what I do, but since I'm doing what I want, then I'm not a puppet or a robot. Well, again, I've already shown how that works just fine in a deterministic worldview, and that objection also evaporates. And finally, if God determined what you would do, he would be forcing you to do it. That's the most obviously false one, because again, you're going to say, just as I have said, God is not just determining what you will do, he's determining the fact that you will also want to do it. That is the only quote-unquote free sense in which you're doing things. And if you admit that that's a good enough definition of free will for you, so that you get to have God in control, and you're doing things that you want, you have completely forfeited all grounds upon which to argue against Calvinism. So what does that mean then? If you want to hold on to those objections, you have to in fact say, no, God is not determining anything that I do. Not that he can't in the sense of being powerful enough. That's not the point here. The point here is so that your false standards and rules and objections can remain rules and objections, you would have to say that God never determines what you would do. Because if he ever once determined anything that you did, all of these objections you bring about against Calvinism would apply to your position as well. And so this is what I mean when I say that you forfeit the debate. How can he bring about the things he wants to happen without determining what you or other people are doing? And I don't know how you can read the Bible and come up with the idea that God is not ever determining what people do. It's so blatantly obvious that all throughout the Bible, God is determining what people do. So when Calvinists say, either God is in control of everything or he's in control of nothing, this is what we mean. Logically speaking, it must be this way. You don't get to have the best of both worlds. You don't get to have God being in control and getting what he wants, but you also having free will, freedom from him. You don't get both, okay? You don't get to have both and remain consistent. Either you have free will, God never determines anything that you do, or you don't have free will. God has determined everything about everything in creation, including you and what you'll do, the fact that you want to do it, and he's done, divine author, he's done it all for good purposes, so on and so forth. Man up and take a position. Does God determine what you will do, yes or no? And if your answer is yes, then you lose the debate.